Lathy, former communications director for the Democratic National Committee, and Scott Jennings, former special assistant to President Bush and a former advisor to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Scott, so Republicans have some thorny issues to deal with as a result of this CBO scoring number. But as you heard Paul Ryan say a bit earlier, he likes the budget savings that accrue as a result of this bill. How do Republicans sell that to the American people?
Well, the reality is they've been selling it for the last several elections, and they've been winning on it. They won elections in 2014 and 2016 on some very simple concepts. A repeal and replace bill has to reduce premiums. This bill does that. It has to cut taxes. This bill does that. It has to spend less money and reduce the deficit. This bill does that. Only in Washington, D.C. are these things judged to be bad things. And regarding coverage out of the CBO scoring, you have to remember the CBO has a terrible track record of predicting the future, and they may have made some mistakes. For instance, they predicted that 5 million people would give up on Medicaid, which is already free to them. I hardly think that's the case. The CBO has a horrible track record of predicting the future. The reality is if these folks were part of your office bracket pool, they'd finish last every single year. Predicting the future is hard. I'm not saying that they're necessarily bad actors here, but certainly you have to take with a grain of salt what they have to say.
Mo, let me read to you some of the stats from the Washington Post. They crunched the numbers. They say if you're 21 years old, you're making about $68,000 a year. Under the Republican plan, your insurance would cost $1,450 for the year. Under Obamacare, that same coverage costs $5,100. If I'm a young person, I kind of like those numbers.
Yeah, but if you're an older American, the same number crunching shows that your premiums are going to skyrocket, and that's actually where a lot of the deficit reduction comes from. Is one, about 14 million Americans getting cut off, mostly low-income folks getting cut off of Medicaid in the next year, about 24 million people losing their insurance in the next decade, and that that premiums will come down because more and more older Americans and low-income Americans aren't going to be able to afford any coverage. They're going to drop out of the marketplace, and so the average comes down for everybody else. So I think this is going to be a really tricky situation for Republicans to sell politically, and we're seeing it now with the fact that even Republicans on the Hill are getting really, really skittish by these numbers. It's the amount of people that are going to lose their coverage. It's the amount that premiums are going to skyrocket, primarily for older and low-income Americans, and the fact that the tax breaks that they're talking about are disproportionately going to people that, frankly, were in the blue counties, not the heartland where people seem to be clamoring for it the most.
We're going to have to leave it there. I'm sorry, we got truncated by that bit of news out of the White House. Mo Lathy and Scott Jennings, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And coming up, stepping up our efforts to target terrorists, a report.